In the beginning there existed only endless chaos. Infinite darkness stretched across a timeless void, undisturbed by order or form. From this tumultuous abyss arose Anu, the primeval embodiment of perfection and unity. Anu, harmonious in all aspects, desired purity and balance, and thus cast out all imperfections from itself. These discarded fragments coalesced into Tathamet, the seven-headed dragon, embodiment of ultimate evil. For countless eons, these primordial beings waged a cataclysmic battle, shattering reality itself. With a final, devastating strike, Anu and Tathamet annihilated each other, and from their remnants sprang forth new realms of existence, the high heavens, birthplace of angels, and the burning hells, lair of demons. But amidst this cosmic war between angels and demons, something extraordinary would eventually emerge, something hidden from the eyes of both heaven and hell. This hidden sanctuary would become known as the World of Sanctuary, a place destined to alter the balance forever. Long before humanity's earliest breaths, the eternal conflict between angels and demons burned fiercely. The high heavens, radiant and pristine, echoed with harmonious choruses of angels, majestic beings embodying virtues of order, valor, hope, and wisdom. At their core rested the crystal arch, a shimmering embodiment of purity and source of angelic existence, from which emerged the members of the Angiris Council, the highest authorities among angels. Imperius, archangel of valor, stood tall, proud, and unyielding. His armor glistened with an eternal golden fire, his spear, Solarion, crackling with divine might. Yet his valor often tipped into arrogance, blinding him to the subtler truths unfolding. Beside him stood Tyrril, archangel of justice, whose magnificent wings shimmered with luminescent justice, and whose sword, Eldruin, embodied fairness tempered with mercy. Opposing them, hidden beneath their angelic splendor, dwelled the seven prime evils of the burning hells. Diablo, the Lord of Terror, embodied fear itself, a shadow capable of corrupting even the purest souls. His brothers, Mephisto, Lord of Hatred, and Baal, Lord of Destruction, were equally formidable, each mastering dominions of darkness that shaped the hells into a relentless inferno. Yet, in the eternal battlefield known as Pandemonium, a turning point was silently approaching. The World Stone, a monumental artifact of unparalleled power, resided at the heart of Pandemonium. It was said the World Stone could shape worlds, warp realities, and dictate the flow of both angelic and demonic energies. For eons, both heaven and hell fought bitterly for control of this stone, believing it held the key to final victory. Amidst the ceaseless war, a curious event transpired. Weary of endless slaughter, the angel Inarius, once a renowned warrior and advisor to the Angiris Council, began to question the purpose of eternal war. Tall and majestic, with wings of radiant gold and eyes glowing softly with reflected wisdom, Inarius pondered deeply on the futility of the unending struggle. Unknown to his angelic kin, his heart harbored a yearning for peace and an escape from this infinite conflict. In the fiery pits of hell, similar disillusionment grew within Lilith, daughter of Mephisto. Despite being forged in hatred, Lilith's heart stirred with rebellion against her kindred's endless violence. Captivating and cunning, her beauty was as mesmerizing as it was lethal, her eyes an entrancing abyss promising salvation and doom alike. Lilith, however, craved freedom, weary of being merely a pawn in her father's game of eternal hatred. Fate, in its unfathomable design, brought Inarius and Lilith together on the battlefield of Pandemonium. Despite their profound differences, they discovered a shared desire, escape from the eternal conflict. Secretly uniting their followers, renegade angels and demons also longing for release from war, they undertook the most audacious plan ever conceived. Stealing the mighty World Stone, they used its immeasurable power to create a hidden realm, shielded from both heaven and hell. This hidden world, forged through the immense power of the World Stone, became sanctuary. A lush realm of fertile forests, majestic mountains, tranquil lakes, and boundless plains, Sanctuary was designed as a refuge, a haven untouched by celestial or infernal conflict. Its existence was veiled from the eyes of heaven and hell alike, concealed by enchantments woven from the combined powers of angel and demon. For a time, Sanctuary thrived in peace, a paradise far removed from endless conflict. Inarius and Lilith, guiding their renegade followers, found something neither angel nor demon had anticipated: love. From their union and those of their followers came forth beings of unique heritage, the Nephalem, offspring imbued with unimaginable potential. Blending angelic grace and demonic power, the Nephalem possessed abilities surpassing either lineage. Yet Sanctuary's tranquility was fragile. The first generations of Nephalem began demonstrating terrifying strength, powers capable of shaking the very foundations of existence. Fearful of what their progeny could become, the renegade angels and demons debated fiercely about their children's fate. Some proposed extermination, while others, especially Lilith, passionately defended them, viewing the Nephilim as the ultimate weapon to end the eternal conflict. Lilith's passion soon turned to rage. Unable to bear the thought of her offspring's destruction, she embarked on a brutal purge, slaughtering those renegades who opposed her. Her massacre was swift, ruthless, and driven by fierce maternal instinct, shattering the unity Sanctuary once enjoyed. Horrified by her actions, yet unable to kill the one he had come to love, Inarius imprisoned Lilith within the void, a timeless prison between realities where she would suffer in endless solitude. With Lilith gone, Inarius faced the Nephilim alone. Deciding against extermination, he used the World Stone to suppress the Nephilim's formidable abilities, diminishing their powers with each passing generation until their heritage faded into myth. Gradually, these diluted beings became humanity, unaware of their celestial and infernal origins. Sanctuary now stood at a precarious crossroad, hidden still, yet vulnerable. Neither heaven nor hell knew of its existence. But for how long? And what would become of this fragile world when the hidden truth inevitably surfaced? Little did any of Sanctuary's inhabitants realize their secret genesis had laid the foundation for a new kind of war, a war unlike any the cosmos had ever known. This would become known as the Sin War, a conflict determining not only the fate of Sanctuary, but perhaps the ultimate destiny of angels, demons, and humanity itself. Centuries passed. Civilizations rose and fell upon Sanctuary's soil, their people ignorant of the divine origins slumbering in their blood. But as generations multiplied, some among humanity began to awaken to strange abilities, unexplained powers that whispered of an ancient lineage. These individuals, sensing their otherworldly gifts, came to be known as the Edirim. The Edirim possessed remarkable potential. Some could heal with a touch, others command fire or bend the very fabric of nature to their will. These powers sparked awe and fear alike, for even they did not understand their source. And among them would rise a man whose destiny would forever alter the fate of the world. Uldysian Uldyiomed. A humble farmer from the obscure village of Seram, Uldysian was a man carved from the soil he tilled, earthy, honest, and content with a quiet life, far from the fires of war and the sermons of distant temples. He held no aspirations beyond the modest, the harvest, his family, and a simple place in the world. Yet beneath that unassuming exterior, hidden even from himself, slumbered a force ancient and boundless, an inheritance of forgotten bloodlines and long-buried potential. In his veins stirred the legacy of angels and demons alike, though he knew it not. The peace he cherished was not to last. Seram, once untouched by the great powers of sanctuary, became the cradle of upheaval. The triune had extended its tendrils into every corner of the world, and Seram was no exception. When Uldysian's brother, Mendel, was falsely accused of murder amidst rising tensions fueled by cultist influence, the fragile harmony of the village shattered. Soldiers arrived to seize them, cloaked in the authority of the Cathedral of Light, their true allegiance murky. Confrontation erupted in a moment of panic and grief. In that instant, the dormant core within Uldysian awakened. With no training, no incantation, and no understanding, he unleashed a storm of raw, incandescent power. The ground trembled. The air itself recoiled. In a flash, the soldiers were reduced to ash, their armor clattering to the earth like discarded shells. Silence followed, the kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from awe and fear. Uldysian stood amidst the ruins of the moment, breathing heavily, his hands trembling not with triumph, but with horror. He had not sought bloodshed, only justice. But justice had come with too high a price. Haunted by the magnitude of what he had done, and terrified of what he might become, Uldysian fled Seram. He left behind the ashes of his old life, stepping onto a path forged in uncertainty. Yet even as he ran, he could not outrun destiny. Others followed him, not with pitchforks and blame, but with wonder and hope. Across sanctuary, scattered individuals began to feel stirrings within themselves, whispers of forgotten strength, flickers of light in the dark. Drawn by some unspoken resonance, they gathered to Uldysian. They did not know his name, but they felt his presence, as if an ancient song buried in their blood had begun to play once more. These men and women, farmers, artisans, nomads, even former triune acolytes, became the first Edirim. Not warriors born, but ordinary souls awakening to extraordinary power. And though they did not yet understand it, they shared the same lineage, the same slumbering birthright. Uldysian did not teach them. He simply was. By being near him, their power bloomed. His journey became theirs. But the burden of leadership weighed heavily. Each day brought new discoveries and new risks. Uldysian's powers grew erratic. Trees wilted or flourished in his passing. Minds bent to his will without intent. He feared that he was losing himself, that he might become the very monster he sought to resist. Still, the Edirim looked to him as a savior, a guide, a beacon of what humanity could become. And others, far older, far more watchful, took notice. From the luminous halls of the Cathedral of Light, Inarius observed with increasing unease. Once a revered member of the Angerus Council, Inarius had crafted sanctuary as a refuge from the eternal conflict, a hidden world where he could reign as both protector and god. Cloaked in divinity, he had forged the Cathedral of Light as both religion and leash, shaping humanity's faith to ensure obedience and stability. Uldysian was a disruption. More than that, he was a mirror. Inarius saw in him the terrifying potential of the Nephalem, the very beings he had sought to suppress through the World Stone, the same beings he had feared would one day challenge even heaven. Uldysian's raw, unbounded power threatened not only the control Inarius held over sanctuary, but the veil of secrecy that protected the realm from the eyes of the high heavens and the burning hells. And so Inarius acted. But not through open confrontation. That was not his way. He donned the guise of the prophet, the messianic figurehead of the cathedral's holy order. Through sermons and visions, through dreams and commands passed down by priests, he sought to quash the Edirim movement before it could ignite a fire too great to contain. He branded Uldysian a heretic, a danger to the divine order. Whispers were planted in cities and towns, and inquisitors set forth to bring him down in the name of holiness. But Inarius miscalculated. For every hand raised against Uldysian, 2 more were offered in allegiance. The more Inarius tried to suppress him, the more the people believed. And in the echo of that belief, Sanctuary began to awaken, not just its people, but the world itself. And in the deepest pits of the burning hells, the prime evils stirred. Diablo, cunning and patient, sensed the ripple of power rising in Sanctuary. For the first time in ages, the lords of hell turned their eyes toward the hidden realm, intrigued by the notion of powerful pawns untouched by either side. Through subtle corruption and false faiths, they planted seeds of their own, maneuvering mortal cults such as the triune to sway the hearts of men. Thus, the sin war began in earnest, not with swords or fire, but with whispers, dreams, and revelations. Sanctuary became a chessboard, with Inarius and Lilith, the prime evils and Uldysian, all vying for dominance. And at the heart of it all, a humble man who had never sought greatness. Yet Inarius was not alone in his interest. From the void, Lilith watched as the Edorem rose. Her prison, though eternal, could not fully restrain her. Her will seeped into Sanctuary, whispering to Uldysian, guiding him, shaping his path. To her, the farmer was not a threat, but the long-awaited answer. A Nephalem reborn, a being with the strength to challenge both heaven and hell. For eons, Lilith had drifted in the void, cast there not by enemy or foe, but by the one she once loved. Inarius, unable to reconcile her fury with his vision, had exiled her to an existence beyond time and form, a prison between worlds. There, in utter isolation, she had waited. She did not sleep. She did not age. Her body disassembled into essence and reformed endlessly, but her will remained intact. And over the ages, her hatred ripened, not cold and festering, but sharp and meticulous. She remembered everything. The creation of Sanctuary, the birth of the Nephilim, the betrayal that tore it all away. Yet she was no mere demon. Daughter of Mephisto she may have been, but Lilith was unlike her brethren. Where Diablo reveled in fear and Baal in ruin, Lilith craved freedom, freedom from the war, from the hierarchy, from the puppeteering of all existence. She alone had dreamed of something new, and that dream had been stolen from her by cowardice masquerading as caution. But now, a ripple in the world stone had reached even the void. Something was stirring in Sanctuary, a presence, a power, a resonance she had not felt since the first Nephilim walked the land. The barrier was weakening. The prison, never intended to be eternal, began to fray at the edges. And in that fraying, Lilith reached through. She did not descend with fire or sound. There was no herald, no trumpet, only a shimmer in the fabric of the world, a soft tearing of reality in a place forgotten by men. A cave, deep within the jungles of Kyrgyzstan, opened like a wound, and from it stepped the mother of misery and deliverance alike. Lilith had returned, but the sanctuary she emerged into was not the one she had left. Gone were the hidden temples and the ordered vision of Inarius's cathedral. Gone were her fellow rebels, those angel-demon hybrids who once dared to birth a new people. In their place stood fragmented faiths, cults in the names of her enemies, and a fragile order teetering on collapse. And at the center of it all, a man. Uldysian. He did not yet know her, but she knew him. She knew his blood. She felt the Nephilim spark in him resonate with her own essence. He was not her creation, and yet, in a way, he was her son. Lilith moved in shadows at first. She whispered into the minds of the lost and the devout. She visited dreams, always veiled, always patient, a voice in the wind, a warmth in the darkness. Her power did not announce itself with destruction. It seduced with comfort. To the persecuted, she offered liberation. To the Edirim, she offered understanding. To Uldysian, she offered destiny. He resisted at first. When her presence brushed against his thoughts, he recoiled, sensing the inhuman shape behind the soft words. He knew power well enough to mistrust it. But Lilith did not force. She planted seeds, questions, visions of sanctuary as it could be, not ruled by angels, not enslaved by demons, but governed by those who bore both within them. The Nephalem, his people, himself. In time, Uldysian allowed her presence to linger. He would not call it communion, but her voice threaded through his dreams. She showed him the ancient past, how she and Inarius had forged the world in secret, how they had brought forth the first Nephilim, how fear had led to massacre. She showed him her pain, her exile, her purpose. And slowly she shifted in his mind from threat to ancestor. Yet Lilith's return was not a secret for long. The triune felt her. The prime evils recognized her echo and raged at her defiance. They had long since abandoned her as a traitor to their cause. Now, her resurgence threatened the final act of their own designs. And Inarius knew the truth the moment the world stone trembled. His old flame had returned, and with her, the chaos he feared more than hell itself. He watched as Uldysian's power soared beyond comprehension, as the Edirim turned from mere followers into awakened vessels of ancestral force. As humanity, once malleable and blind, began to dream not of gods, but of self-rule, he saw Lilith's hand behind it all, even if it moved in shadows. In desperation, Inarius revealed himself. The skies above Sanctuary darkened, not with storm or shadow, but with something heavier. A stillness like the moment before a blade is drawn, wordless and vast. For those attuned to the currents of power, it was undeniable. The world was holding its breath. Inarius had finally chosen to act. No longer content to rule from behind his veiled clergy, the renegade angel descended in full celestial majesty. His arrival was not heralded by armies or fanfare. It was a singular point of radiance tearing open the sky above the Cathedral of Light. His wings, latticed with divine energy, unfurled like the limbs of a fallen star. His eyes blazed with the clarity of justice warped by obsession. The time for masks had ended. Inarius was a being forged in valor and refined by centuries of isolation. He had dreamed of peace but built a prison. He had sought to guide but demanded worship. Now that carefully ordered vision was unraveling, undone by a man who had once tilled the earth with his bare hands. Uldysian did not flee. He stood in a valley framed by cliffs, scorched by ancient winds, surrounded by the Edirim, whose eyes flickered with fear and awe. But his own gaze remained steady. He did not need grandeur. He needed truth. Inarius descended alone. The land recoiled beneath his feet. Grass withered. The air trembled. He radiated not just power but pressure, like the core of a collapsing star. Their first words were not exchanged aloud, but resonated through thought, essence, memory. It was a meeting not only of wills, but of worlds. "You overstep, mortal," Inarius declared, his voice like distant thunder. "This realm is mine, this people, mine. You tamper with forces you do not understand." Uldysian's reply was not defiant. It was calm, measured. "I understand enough. I see what you've built. A cage of light. A crown forged from lies." The angel's wings flared, not in violence, but in warning. He was not here for discourse. He had come to reassert dominion. With a wave of his hand, he displayed visions of sanctuary's creation, of the world stone pulsing in a golden chamber deep beneath the world. He showed Uldysian the labor it had taken to hide this place from the eternal conflict, the bloodshed he had averted, the chaos he had contained. "You risk the destruction of everything," Inarius intoned. "Your kind was not meant to rise. You were meant to endure, quietly." But Uldysian had seen the suffering in that quiet, the shackles forged by false prophets, the way the cathedral had broken minds in the name of peace. His voice rose, not with anger, but with revelation. "You fear us because you see what we truly are. Not your mistakes, not your wards, but your equals." Inarius stepped forward, and the very fabric of space trembled around him. The Iderum fell to their knees, overwhelmed. But Uldysian did not waver. Their essences collided, not in strikes or sorcery, but in sheer force of identity. And then, without a gesture, without a spell, Inarius struck. Light tore through the air, not as beam or bolt, but as a blade of pure judgment. Uldysian caught it, not with his hands, but with his will. The air split open around them, the ground turned to glass. The Edirem cried out in terror, but Uldysian stood unmoved. In that moment, he did not just repel the blow, he reversed it. He channeled it through himself, converted its essence into something new, something no angel or demon had ever wielded. Balance, the power of life and death, of light and shadow, a convergence, not a division. Inarius staggered. For the first time in millennia, the angel bled, not from flesh, but from pride. The confrontation did not escalate into open war. Uldysian did not wish to destroy Inarius, and Inarius, though humiliated, feared what would happen if he truly unleashed his full might. The world stone still pulsed in resonance with both of them. It was the heartbeat of sanctuary. And should their battle rupture its harmony, all creation might unravel. Instead, Inarius retreated, not in defeat, but in alarm. He returned to the cathedral and cloaked himself in silence, contemplating the unthinkable, that he had birthed a world he could no longer control, that the experiment had outgrown the architect. Uldysian, meanwhile, did not celebrate. He felt only weight, an expanding awareness that the more power he used, the more distant his humanity became. He had faced an angel and survived. Worse still, he had matched him, not as a miracle, but as a beginning. And in the quiet that followed, Lilith whispered again, soft, indulgent. "You see it now. You were never lesser." Lilith vanished once more, her work not yet finished. And Uldysian stood at the crossroads of fate, no longer a farmer, no longer a follower, but the fulcrum upon which sanctuary's destiny now balanced. The war was no longer between heaven and hell. It was within the soul of humanity itself. Lilith, in fleeting visions, encouraged him. She painted a future where the Nephalem would rise to rule all creation, free from the tyranny of angel and demon alike. Uldysian, torn between humility and destiny, began to realize the truth. Sanctuary could no longer remain hidden. The world stood on the brink of revelation, and he, its reluctant harbinger. Yet within the grand cathedral of light, Inarius brooded. Once a rebel, he had become a tyrant cloaked in divinity, his once noble ideals twisted by millennia of isolation and control. He demanded obedience, not balance, worship, not understanding. In Uldysian, he saw not a successor, but a threat to his rule. And so, the pieces moved. The cathedral hunted the Edirem. The triune manipulated villagers with false miracles and unseen chains. The prime evils plotted to pit heaven and hell against sanctuary, then claim the spoils. And through it all, Uldysian walked the path of prophecy and blood. But what path would he choose? Would he become a messiah of freedom, or a weapon of extinction? Sanctuary's fate, and perhaps that of all creation, now hung upon the shoulders of one man. The fires of conflict smoldered across Sanctuary, unseen by most, yet steadily devouring the illusion of peace. It began not with war drums or banners, but with a whisper carried from village to village. The name of a man who had touched something divine or infernal. Uldysian Uldiamed, once a simple farmer of Seram, now moved through the world like a force of nature. His awakening had begun as a flicker of resistance, a surge of will, but soon it became something greater, a flame igniting dry fields of fear, doubt, and desperation. His presence stirred the dormant blood of the Nephalem, a heritage long forgotten, buried beneath generations of suppression. Across Sanctuary, people began to change, not just in thought, but in essence. The Edorem, awakened humans drawn to Uldysian's cause, found their latent power rising, guided not by incantation or study, but by the resonance of belief. With each town he passed through, with each soul who heard his voice or met his eyes, Uldysian drew more to his banner. Yet this was no army of conquest. He sought no throne, claimed no divine mandate. It was his certainty, his unwavering defiance of heaven and hell alike, that made others believe. But with this unity came peril. For in every new awakening, in every Edorem who cast aside the chains of doctrine and fear, a ripple disturbed the fabric of the world. These ripples did not go unnoticed. The triune, ancient and insidious, stirred beneath the guise of benevolence. Founded by the prime evils themselves, the cult had woven itself into the daily lives of Sanctuary's people with the precision of a spider spinning a flawless web. To the unknowing, the triune offered faith, discipline, strength. But in truth, it was a mechanism of control, an engine by which Diablo, Mephisto, and Baal harvested devotion through deception. Each mask of worship bore a different name. Dialon, Lord of Determination, cloaked Diablo's mastery of fear in the form of ambition and progress. Mephis, the so-called bringer of justice, gave Mephisto's hatred the appearance of righteous indignation. Bala, patron of strength and courage, disguised Baal's thirst for destruction behind the veil of stoic resolve. They did not demand sacrifice through blade or flame. They extracted it through obedience. The faithful were cattle in velvet chains, their prayers feeding the very hellspawn they feared. But Uldysian saw through the lie. With him stood his brother Mendeln, once a scholar of reason and books, now a conduit for darker truths. Mendeln, who had touched death and been touched in return, heard voices in the silence, first madness, then clarity. From the shadows between life and afterlife, he heard Rathma, the firstborn of Sanctuary, and began to understand the balance of all things. Through this communion, Mendeln found purpose not in conquest, but in equilibrium. He became a vessel of the balance, walking the path between light and darkness. Where Uldysian inspired masses, Mendeln carved meaning from death itself. The brothers were opposites, flame and stone, but together they became unshakable. The conflict escalated. The triune responded not with open warfare, but with whispers, agents, and subversion. Yet every temple built on deception began to crumble. Uldysian's presence unmasked the demons behind priestly smiles. The Edorem, wielding newfound abilities, toppled idols not with swords, but with revelation. They broke the enchantments that had lulled generations into complacency. In some cities, entire congregations turned upon their high priests. The temples fell, not to blood, but to enlightenment. Still, power begets consequence. With each miracle performed, with each mind awakened, Uldysian felt his own identity fray. He could feel the emotions of his followers like tides rising and crashing inside him. Their joys became his joys. Their fears infected his dreams. He bore the weight of their belief, and it threatened to crush what remained of the man from Seram. He questioned not whether his cause was just, but whether his will was still his own. Was he leading, or merely being shaped by the power flowing through him? In the cold glow of the Cathedral of Light, Inarius watched the world shift beneath his feet. The angel turned God, who had long ruled sanctuary from behind stained glass and illusions of divinity, now saw his dominion slip. His creation, once silent, compliant, blind, had begun to stir with memory and strength. Uldysian, though mortal, now carried the spark of potential that even angels feared. And so Inarius acted, not with fire, but with deceit. He sent avatars and visions preaching peace through surrender. He twisted the minds of those who doubted, planting seeds of fear. Through agents and false messiahs, he sowed confusion, hoping to fracture the Edirum from within. And still, he hesitated to confront Uldysian directly, as if uncertain what he might see in the man's eyes, a reflection of his own failure, or a glimpse of something more divine. Uldysian remained resolute. With each lie uncovered, his power deepened, his clarity sharpened. He walked paths once forbidden, ancient sites where the energy of the Worldstone still pulsed faintly beneath the surface. In the ruins of forgotten cities, he saw glimpses of the past, visions of Lilith's rebellion, of the Nephilim's first breath, of a sanctuary born not of mercy, but of defiance. And from the void, Lilith stirred. She reached Uldysian through dreams, through memories not his own, reminding him that the Edirum were meant to surpass their ancestors. She urged him toward ascension. Yet her intentions, though cloaked in affection, veiled an ambition as vast as Inarius's pride. Exiled, cast into a prison of silence between realities, she had not been idle. Her essence, tied inexorably to Sanctuary's fate, brushed against Uldysian's dreams. She whispered promises, offered visions of victory, of a world ruled by mortals, free from the tyranny of angels and demons alike. But was it love that guided her? Or ambition unbound? Her presence loomed over Uldysian's thoughts like a storm on the horizon, beautiful, terrifying, inevitable. Thus, Sanctuary stood at the edge of revelation. Its people, no longer children of myth but heirs to power, walked paths unseen for millennia. And the battle lines, once hidden, began to glow with celestial fire and infernal heat. For the first time since its creation, Sanctuary's future was being written not by gods or demons, but by mortals who dared to reclaim it. But the more obstacles he conjured, the stronger Uldysian became. For every betrayal, the farmer-turned-leader grew more resolute. His journey led him to the ruins of ancient cities buried in jungle and sand, forgotten places where the echoes of Sanctuary's first days still lingered. There, he uncovered truths buried by time, visions of Lilith's return, of the Worldstone's manipulation, of Sanctuary's secret purpose. The lines between allies and manipulators blurred. Was Lilith a savior or a serpent? Was Inarius protector or prison warden? Uldysian stood between forces older than time, a pawn poised to become a king or a god. And his followers looked to him not just as leader, but as divine. Then came the breach. The veil was torn. No longer did Sanctuary lie hidden from the warring eyes of heaven and hell. The surge of power unleashed by Uldysian's confrontation with Inarius had rippled through the fabric of existence, like a tremor shaking the pillars of creation. The protective wards, once bound to the world stone and sustained by secrecy, faltered. For the first time in eons, the scent of sanctuary drifted into the eternal conflict, and the powers beyond smelled blood. From the skies came shimmering radiance, wings of burning silver, battalions of sentient light, halos forged into blades. The Angiris Council, long deliberative and divided, now acted as one. Sanctuary was no longer theory. It was reality. A world forged without their consent, seeded with beings whose potential threatened the divine order itself. Imperius, the Archangel of Valor, led the vanguard. He did not hesitate. His fury was not political, it was primal. He saw the Nephalem as an affront to everything the heavens represented, unregulated, impure, the corruption of divine essence through demonic taint. His blade, Solarian, thirsted not just for battle, but for purification. Oriel, Archangel of Hope, descended more cautiously. Her wings pulsed with sorrow. She did not relish the judgment to come, but saw it as necessary. Even hope, she knew, must be tempered by truth. And the truth was that humanity had reached beyond its station. Tyrael, Justice Incarnate, hesitated. Within him stirred conflict. He had once stood for principle above prejudice, but the presence of the Nephilim complicated everything. Were they guilty or free? And as heaven opened, hell erupted. From fissures deep in the earth, black flame surged. The air turned acidic. Trees wept sap as blood. The prime evils, long plotting through the triune, had no intention of letting this opportunity pass. Sanctuary, once a hidden experiment, had become a contested prize. Diablo, Lord of Terror, arrived not with soldiers, but with whispers. He invaded the minds of the faithful, turning their dreams into phantoms. His power was not brute force, it was erosion, identity, confidence, trust, all withered under his unseen touch. Mephisto unleashed judgment in the guise of righteousness. His followers marched in fanatical trances, believing themselves holy instruments. Hatred dressed itself in robes of zeal. Baal, ever the destroyer, conjured monstrosities from molten earth, spires of teeth and iron, twisted forms with no purpose but ruin. He did not strategize, he consumed. The world trembled. Villages vanished under wings of light or storms of flame. Mountains cracked, seas boiled. Sanctuary, this fragile dream, became the center of a war older than time itself. Caught between these forces, the Edirem rallied. They were no longer merely awakened. They were changing. Each confrontation, each trial drew forth deeper wells of power, ancestral echoes of the first Nephilim. Uldysian's bond to them grew metaphysical. He did not just lead them, he carried them. Their victories were astonishing. Where angels expected weakness, they met resistance. Where demons demanded submission, they found defiance. But with each surge of power came consequence. The world stone, buried beneath Mount Ariat, pulsed in dissonance. Its rhythms, once steady, now warbled, reacting to the expanding human potential. Uldysian's transformation grew impossible to ignore. No longer mortal in any conventional sense, his presence bent the environment itself. No longer mortal in any conventional sense, his very presence bent the environment. Trees leaned toward him, water rippled around his steps. When he spoke, his words echoed in the minds of thousands. He became a conduit, not of divine will nor demonic wrath, but of something new. He was not divine. He was not infernal. He was something else entirely, a living fulcrum of balance. On a blasted plain where night had fallen at midday, three forces converged. Heaven's legions shimmered along the ridges, a sea of white fire and golden steel. Hell's beasts clustered in snarling silence, the ground beneath them cracked and bleeding. Between them, the Edirem stood, smaller, fewer, but radiant with purpose. Uldysian stepped forth. He bore no armor, no weapon, only truth. His body glowed with resonance, not a magic, but a manifestation of unity. He was the sum of all they had endured, a star collapsing under the weight of choice. Imperius confronted him. "You defy the order of the cosmos," the archangel thundered. "You claim dominion over that which was never yours." But Uldysian did not reply with argument. He raised his hand, not in threat, but in stillness, and the wind halted. Time itself seemed to hold. His voice, when it came, was not loud. "We are not yours to command." Then came the explosion, not of flame nor fury, but of clarity. Across Sanctuary, Nephalem bloodlines ignited, powers long dormant in mankind stirred awake. Hidden sages, wanderers, children with dreams of flame, all felt it, the truth of their origin, the truth of their potential. They were not mistakes. They were inheritance. The battle that followed was not measured in tactics. It was existential. Demons fell like shadows at dawn. Angels faltered, confused by the precision of mortal resistance. And in the center of it all, Uldysian radiated force. Yet he saw the toll. With every burst of strength, he burned faster, his essence stretched, frayed, threatened to collapse. He had become too vast, too powerful. Even his will could barely contain it. And then he understood. This could not continue. Not without destroying everything. Uldysian stood at the center. Refusing both heaven's tyranny and hell's dominion, he declared Sanctuary its own. No longer would mankind be a footnote in the eternal conflict. No longer would humans be tools for ancient wars. The Edirem rallied behind his call even as their enemies closed in from both realms. Demons fell as their lies were torn away. Angels wavered, unprepared for resistance not rooted in hate but in conviction. Uldysian stood at the center, a lighthouse amidst a cosmic storm. But with each moment his essence stretched thinner, his soul unraveling beneath the strain of boundless power. He understood the truth. If this continued, he would cease to be Uldysian. He would become something that the world could no longer hold, and Sanctuary would be the price. So he made his choice. He turned inward, not to escape, but to restore. Every ounce of Nephilim might, every spark of the world stone's echo within him surged. The heavens and hells waged their final gambit, but Uldysian stepped beyond it. He spoke one last time, not in words, but in will, and the war unmade itself. With thought alone, he pushed back the angels and the demons, not with violence, but with sheer force of being. They faltered, not slain, but erased from the realm. He expelled their presence from Sanctuary entirely. One by one, the soldiers of heaven and hell vanished until only the mortals remained. The skies cleared. The land held its breath. But such a deed bore a cost. The world stone, disturbed by the imbalance of such power, began to unravel. Reality trembled at the seams. The very fabric of Sanctuary threatened to collapse. Uldysian, exhausted and trembling, but standing at the edge of godhood, understood the only path forward. He gathered his followers one final time. With sorrow and serenity, he bid farewell to those he loved. Mendeln stood by, his face a mask of grief. Lilith cloaked once more in mortal guise, watched from afar, powerless to change his fate. With each breath, he could feel the world around him, not just people or places, but intentions, fears, dreams, and pain. Sanctuary's essence pulsed within him. The roots of trees, the tremors beneath distant mountains, the heartbeat of every living thing, all resonated in tandem with his will. He no longer channeled power. He was power. But in that realization came terror. He saw what others could not, the threads of creation pulling taut beneath his feet. The world stone, the foundation upon which sanctuary had been built, groaned beneath the weight of his being. He had become a living contradiction, one not born of heaven or hell, but something that eclipsed both. And should he lose control, should even a single thought stray, the very world might unravel in an instant. In that moment of clarity, surrounded by Edirem, angels, and demons alike, Uldysian knew what he must do. He turned away from the battlefield, not in retreat but in transcendence. The light surrounding him brightened, not with anger, but with sorrow. He looked upon his followers, whose faces bore awe and fear in equal measure. He looked upon Mendel, his brother in blood and fate, and he whispered, "This must not endure." Mendel understood before the words finished. There was no spell, no plea that could change what followed. Uldysian raised his arms, not in defiance but in surrender, and released everything. Power surged, not as a wave of destruction, but as a reversal, a return. The energy that had awakened the Edirem, that had challenged gods, that had bent the world, he gave it all back. He unraveled his own existence, strand by strand, sacrificing divinity for stability. The world stone pulsed one last time in harmony with him. Then it quieted. The heavens withdrew, stunned into silence. The legions of hell, blinded by the brilliance, retreated into the rifts that had birthed them. The battlefield fell still. Uldysian was gone. No corpse, no monument, only peace. In the days that followed, the world began to heal. The Edirem, now once more simply human, awoke, scattered and confused. Their powers had faded, but their memories remained. They remembered what it had felt like to be more, to stand free of angel or demon. And though the magic had left them, the conviction remained. The Angiris Council reconvened. Imperius, still fuming, demanded extermination. Sanctuary, he claimed, was too dangerous to exist. But Tyrael, changed by what he had witnessed, argued otherwise. He spoke not just of power, but of choice, of how one mortal had stood against the tide and chosen sacrifice over dominion. Auriel agreed. So did Itharael, archangel of fate, whose visions now showed infinite branching futures, none certain, but many filled with promise. By a narrow vote, sanctuary was spared. Hell, too, fell into silence. The primevals, robbed of their victory, seethed in the shadows. Their plans had not ended, but they had been delayed. In the centuries to come, they would return. They would always return. But for now, their grip was loosened. Inarius, wounded in spirit and pride, was captured by Mephisto in the wake of the battle. Torn from his cathedral and dragged into the depths of hell, the former prophet faced a torment as eternal as the war he tried to escape. His fate would become a warning, not a legacy. The world stone, however, remained. It had borne the birth of sanctuary. It had been the instrument of creation, containment, and control. But now it throbbed with conflict. Some within the heavens whispered that it should be destroyed. Others argued for its preservation. For now it was left untouched, buried deep beneath the mountains of Ariat, veiled in warding runes and guarded by ancient protectors. But the balance it once maintained was shifting. Mendel did not forget. The death of his brother shattered him, but in that pain he found purpose. Guided still by Rathma and the dragon Tragul, Mendeln journeyed deep into the hidden places of sanctuary. There he began to record the truth, not for power, but for preservation. He formed the first tenets of what would become the priests of Rathma, later known to the world as necromancers. Not cultists, not conjurers, but custodians of balance, students of life and death, guardians against both divine arrogance and demonic hunger. They would never rule, but they would always remember. The Sin War had not ended in conquest. It ended in revelation. The world of sanctuary, once a secret experiment, had revealed its soul. It was not a battlefield. It was not a tool. It was home, to beings neither angel nor demon, but something altogether new. Something human. Uldysian's sacrifice became legend. His name faded as he intended, buried beneath generations of retelling and suppression. But his essence lingered, in the courage of rebels, in the questions of scholars, in the fire of heroes yet to be born. And though the Sin War passed into myth, its impact endured. For sanctuary had changed. The veil was gone. The storm was coming. But for a moment, just one, there was peace. And in that silence, the world remembered the man who could have been a god, and chose instead to save the world.